Welcome back to the Critical Moves podcast. I'm Al, and today I'm joined as ever by Jack. Hey, Jack.
Hey, Al.
Are you good?
Yeah, I'm good. And you?
Yeah. I'm great, and I'm really happy because Nuno's back.
What's up, guys? How are you doing?
It warmed my soul when you came begging to return to the podcast.
A man got it.
And I was like, yeah, of course you can come back, but it really is great to have you back. And we also have a new team member who is he's been offered refugee status with Critical Moves. If you know strategy gaming podcasts, you'll know this name. It's Drexy.
Oh, sorry, I think I joined the wrong podcast. What podcast is this?
This is Critical Moves. You may have heard of us.
No, sorry. I better leave. I've obviously joined the wrong Discord channel. Nah.
Clearly.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me. Hopefully, you'll have to do all the editing of all my bad rambling and stuff. So,
yeah, man, that's fine. That's fine. You know, it's kind of my life now is editing the rambling, and now Nuno's back. That editing is going to go up even more, but it's great. It's great. He tends to monologue, but that's why we have cutting tools. So anyway, today we are going to be talking about Civ 7. Jack is a huge fan of Civ 7, and I'm sure he's happy with me saying that. And it hasn't been particularly well received from what I've seen out there, and also within Critical Moves as well. But Jack thinks it's awesome. And I also wanted to talk to these fine gentlemen about Firaxis in general. And I can't remember which episode it was, but we talked about it would be a really good episode about Firaxis in Crisis because it just sounds quite poetic. And, we don't think Civ 7 has done particularly well. But some people do, don't they, Nuno?
Me? No, I don't.
No, not you.
Oh, not me. Yeah. I mean, Take-Two thinks the game did well, so hey, good for them, I guess.
We think it hasn't done particularly well, and we wanted to talk about what this means for Firaxis as a company, what it means for Take-Two as a parent company. But let's open up by going to Jack, who loves Civ 7.
Yeah, I do really like Civ 7. Let's go down a little bit on that rating tier. I've been playing a lot of Civ 7 this year. I didn't own it last year. I picked it up maybe actually around December was whenever I got Civ 7. And I've been playing for a few months before the big Test of Time update has finally come out. And now that it's come out, I've got just a handful of hours in that. But yeah, I've been playing single player. I've been playing a ton of multiplayer Civ 7. And yeah, I just got to say, I remember when I was first joining Critical Moves. It's kind of hard to remember, but I remember you and Joe did an episode where Joe played Civ 7 and you asked him questions and you two were going on and on about how bad the game was. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure they've done updates and kind of improved the baseline of what the game had to offer at launch for a lot of the community. But I do respect what both of you had to probably say about Civ 7 because I don't remember so much what you said in the episode, but I know that since then I've played it and I think it's really good. Everybody in my friend group that I would play Civ with said that it was better than Civ 6, and I didn't trust that, and I would say, you should listen to our podcast. And then I played Civ 7, and then I was like, okay, I kind of prefer this to Civ 6.
Well, you're in the minority, aren't you? Because when you look at the metrics, if you look at the player numbers for even Civ 5 and 6 both had a higher peak player base on release, and they are both now consistently higher in terms of player numbers than Civ 7.
That is true. I keep up with that because I'm well aware of the fact that like Civ 5 and 6 exponentially higher. If you were asking me why, I would say the really controversial opinion is I think people don't know how good Civ 7 is. And if I had like a more practical opinion that wouldn't get angry comments about me, but engagement, Woohoo. But if I gave like a really practical reason why, I think it's just because the community might prefer Civ 5 and Civ 6 for various reasons, because so much is kind of different about Civ 7 and design principle. But we'll get into that later, I'm sure. But yeah, no, I'm in the minority as well for this call, right? I think it's going to be a 1v3 here. I brought my boxing gloves today.
I would like to ask you, I know you probably only just started playing again, but where do you think the turnaround was for it to be good? Is it this test of time update? Is that what's done it?
No,
Or
I actually enjoyed it whenever I first bought it, maybe back in December, like I said. Funnily enough, and we'll kind of touch on this, I'm sure, I was worried about the test of time update because the feature this is a terrible thing for me to have done from a journalistic position, but I shared an opinion with the rest of the team for a game I had not actually played, where I, like everybody else at Critical Moves, I blasted Civ 7 for this change your Civ every age thing, and it was actually like one of the best features of Civ 7. I thought it was pretty cool actually, and I thought that the implementation of it, especially in like multiplayer, was a ton of fun. So when this new update was coming out and it was inherently changing the way the game would work, which is optional, you can still play the normal Civ 7 way. But when they said you could play as one Civ throughout all the ages, I got worried. I was like, whoa, don't take away this feature that you introduced that I actually like, and don't make it so that the feature that I like is like the secondary unpopular way to play. So I think it was really good in December. I'm still getting used to the menus now. I think that some of the changes they've made for the menus aren't super. They don't look super great to me.
let's address the elephant in the room here, because this Civ changing feature, whatever, was actually taken from another game, right? It was taken from Humankind from Amplitude Gaming, and the reason that game failed was because of this switching of your civs partway through a game. It was like that game pretty much died because of that feature. And then for some reason, Firaxis decided, well, we're going to take this feature from this game that failed because of this feature. It's like, but you're claiming you actually like this. Have they done it better, do you think? Or did you play Humankind?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I'm in a position where I never actually played Humankind, but I know that we brought this up on the podcast, and I actually used it as a point. Again, without really knowing, I'll take accountability here. I would say things like, this is a feature copied from Humankind, and that game didn't do very well, so why did Sid Meier think this would work for Civ 7, right? All I can really speak on is the way it's implemented in Civ 7. I can't even really compare it to Humankind just because I don't know. But I think, like you said, to address the elephant in the room, for Al, who may not know exactly how it works, and or Nuno, if you have played or not, I'm not sure. One of the things I liked about the feature was, from a gameplay sense, it kind of made sense, right? Like, it doesn't make sense that you start the game as Harriet Tubman and you're playing the Greeks, and then when you enter the exploration age, you play the Hawaiians. But it kind of makes sense in a way where, depending on the civ or the leader you choose at the start of the game, what is called the Antiquity era, you either automatically unlock civs in a pool to choose from for the next age, or you do things in the game that naturally unlock those civs. And so this isn't like an account-wide thing. This is per match. So if I'm playing an online match, if I build 5 total walls in my cities, you unlock the Norman Empire for access to you when you change to the next age. And so there's 3 ages. You change your civ 3 times. And the reason I like the feature from a gameplay perspective is because, in a strategic sense, it is like a class system. It's like builds. I think one of the major improvements they made from other Civilization games is, I described this recently to someone, but Civ 6 and Civ 5, they describe leaders in like one of 3 ways. You had militaristic leaders, you had production leaders, and you had scientific leaders or religious leaders. I suppose there might have been 4. So you had leaders that clearly their bonuses were like leaning towards military units, leaning towards science, which I think technically was just production, and was types of buildings and bonuses to like resources. And then your religious leaders inherently got bonuses to like spirituality, faith, using the missionaries and stuff. the thing I like about Civ 7 is they expanded that roster. Now there's economic leaders, now there's militaristic leaders, there's diplomatic leaders, there's expansionist leaders. And then what they do is they treat it like Pokemon where you get 2 of each. So every leader is either economic militaristic or militaristic expansionist or so on and so forth. And what I liked about that was you could take any leader, which had their own bonuses, just like a previous Civ, and now pair it with any Civ that had their own bonuses. And by naturally playing the game, you were actually synergizing the abilities of your Civ and your leader, and then getting to do the same thing 2 more times in the same game to like build a custom build and play a Civ a little bit more modular to your liking. So there were leaders that were clearly beneficial for some reasons permanently, and then there were Civs that really served a purpose for only one age out of the game. And you would choose that Civ and be at an advantage for other people because that's maybe the way you like to play most, or it gives you bonuses you know how to do things with. So I'll stop rambling about it now. Hopefully that made sense to everybody. But I think it's really cool because strategy games get such into this, they get into these limited options like some of these RTS games where the units are going to be the same. It's a symmetrical game. And Civ 7 made it even more asymmetrical but customizable, something that Civ 6 offered by letting you choose alternate leaders for your Civs, and that was it.
I suppose it's increased the replayability then, hasn't it, as well, in terms of, it sounds to me like, say, for example, if you in the first stage were quite aggressive or whatever, then you might unlock someone like Genghis Khan, for example.
Absolutely.
No, did you play Humankind? Is that how the leader swapped in that game, or was that just really random?
I have not played Humankind. Honestly, I'm just here to lobby for XCOM 3 on this conversation. So I
We'll
just
come back
hope
to
that someone at Take-Two, if you're listening to this, stop what you're doing. Okay? Don't do anything else. Just pitch XCOM 3 to someone, and please give us XCOM 3. That's all you need to do. Just stop working on Civilization 7 and give us XCOM 3. Okay, let the game go back to work to work on Civilization 6. Thank you. That's all I have to say for today.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Vote for me as well for that as well. I've played Humankind and it's a long time, but from what I remember, you got 3 choices of what you could change to. Now, see, the issue with this system, right, is because these games are historical games. In a perfect world, you'd want to be the same nation throughout time. But obviously, I can't think of many nations at all that have been like great through all the ages, right? So it doesn't make sense either to have like even like the Romans today, because, for example, Italy isn't doing too great nowadays, really. So you wouldn't want to be Italy in the modern age. Sorry to all the Italians out there, but so the way they've gone through this now is you basically switching like basically countries almost. But that sort of, for people who are into the historical thing, they're thinking, well, I'm like a totally different nation now. So I can get why it's done, but there's pros and cons to these 2 systems, right? For, like I'm saying, in a perfect world, you'd like to be the same country, just it would have been nice if that country was like great through all the ages, but that doesn't happen. So you have to now switch nations. But that, I find a lot of people have an issue with this because it's very jarring. And also, for example, Al, if you were playing like the exterminator robots in Stellaris, and then they suddenly turned into like the spiritualists halfway through the game, you'd find that quite jarring because you spent all that time setting up your faction, and then suddenly it changes midway through the game.
Yeah, massively so. Massively so. I mean, Amplitude described when they were developing Humankind, when they announced Humankind, and it was with such fanfare, and they described it as it would be their magnum opus. It would be their life's work. And of course, everybody said, "Oh, it's just a Civ clone." So they said, "Well, actually, no, we're doing this really cool thing, and we're going to introduce this situation where you can switch your Civs or switch your leaders, whichever one it was." And it fell flat. And I think a lot of people attribute the poor performance of Humankind to that Civ switching mechanic. And it's really quite interesting to hear that Jack enjoys that aspect, because universally the opinion is that Firaxis were mad to introduce a mechanic which caused Humankind, according to many people, caused Humankind to fall flat, and yet they introduced it anyway. Now, from what Jack describes, it sounds like they've done it really well. But you're right; it would be extremely jarring. Now, I played a lot of Civ 5. I mean, I think one of the first strategy games I really fell into and got absorbed in was Civ 2. Absolutely just loved that game. Showing my age. So I've been a fan of the series for a long time, but I wanted to ask Nuno, is it kind of cool to hate Civ 7? Are we maybe being ever so slightly cheap and just following the trend of, well, it's mostly negative on Steam, so therefore it must be rubbish, and therefore it's cool to hate Civ 7?
I don't think so. I think the main reason, like you were saying, just the civilization, the Civ changing mechanic. I don't think it worked for a lot of people. First, because like you maybe you have sort of a favorite country, you just want to play as your country, and then you want to play that country from beginning to end. But I think it goes further than that. I think this is just a fundamental misunderstanding of the way people or the casual player tends to enjoy civilization, which is how. So the question would be, how many Civ games have you actually finished, and how many have you started? So what I'm trying to say is that I think most people play a game like this. So you enter civilization, you start a new game, and you get out after a couple of hours, and maybe you have like gone to the medieval period, maybe you've gone to the Age of Sail period, maybe even gone to the Industrial Age. But I don't think that a lot of people play the long game, so this feature might not interest a lot of folk. And the other one would be that I just think that a lot of people also have their favorite era to play as. I know me, and it's just being honest here. I think all my friends played Civilization at sometime during their lives. Most of them don't play at the moment, but when we did, everyone had their favorite era. So maybe, like I said, it was Industrial Age, World War II, future or near future, something like that. So if you play like this as a more casual kind of player, this feature doesn't really add a lot to your playstyle. If anything, it just detracts, right? Because how often are you going to be using that feature yourself? And do you really want to? Because if I'm going to play a game as, and if I want to role play as the British, let's say for our British friends on the podcast, I don't want to go back for a couple of centuries and now suddenly you're playing as the Hawaiians, or maybe now you're playing as Genghis Khan, just because it kind of ruins it for me. Yes, I know I might have been a bit aggressive during the early game, but why am I Genghis Khan now? So I don't know how exactly the mechanic works, but I'm just going by for what you said. But I just think it comes down to a misunderstanding of how the casual player, and I include myself on that. I don't mean that casual in a bad sense, because I'm also the kind of guy that I just start a new game, play a couple of hours, and then just go back 2 weeks later, and I just don't even remember what I was doing. So I'm just gonna start a new one, and I don't think I have finished a lot of games. So in the end, I think it comes down to this: just they could have kept things the same. But if you remember, when Civilization 5 came out, the game wasn't all that well received too. People had a lot of criticism because Civilization 4 was a really beloved title, and people really enjoyed that game. So Civ changed a lot, and I remember quite clearly people just shitting on the game's graphics because they were saying that the game looked like it was a mobile game, it was like a game for consoles and all that. So this is not the first time we've seen this kind of backlash against Civilization, and hopefully Take-Two will turn things around. And just to bring the other point of discussion that you started earlier into the conversations, that Civilization 7 might have been panned by the players, but the Take-Two CEO came out and said that the game was a commercial success. It sold very well. So maybe they have enough cash to keep development going, just new expansions, and that the game will eventually cater to most people. But I think it's a fundamental design flaw for me. It's just I love Civilization, but I don't have any interest in playing a Civilization game just because they're gonna force me to change Civs mid game. Just not something I was looking forward to. So it's the kind of mechanic that sounds good on paper, but I don't think it works. For the average kind of guy, so just me who starts a game here and there, here and there, here and there.
Well, the first thing I'll bring up really is with Civ, the leaders are a big thing, right? You know, they're very memeable as well. So, like Gandhi, for example. So, for that to change is a big change. But going back to like what you were saying about Civs, both Civ 5 and Civ 6 were also penned at the start. I think Civ 5 was the biggest change because you moved from squares to hexes, right? And then you had one unit per tile, where before you had doom stacks basically before that, right? So I think there's a separation in eras of Civ, right? 1 to 4, then 5 onwards. 5 took 2 DLCs to get good, right? 6, I never really played it, but I believe that took about 2 DLCs until the community switched from 5 to 6. Now we've got Civ 7. Is it going to be the same case?
The issue is that so when you look at the figures, Civ 7 peaked at 84,558 on launch day and never got anywhere near that ever again. And within weeks, Civ 5, which is 15 years old at the point where Civ 7 was released, was outperforming Civ 7. So I understand and I appreciate that when these games come out, you're always gonna have, and I think we find this all the time. There's always these people who they don't like change. The Luddites, aren't they? We don't like to see change. We just want to go back to playing what we used to play. So Civ 5 came out and it wasn't well received, and Civ 6 wasn't well received, and Civ 7 wasn't well received. But 5 and 6 are routinely and consistently outperforming Civ 7 now.
Yeah. Can I just quickly give you a couple of numbers, right? Because people don't even, I'm not sure that people understand how big Civ is, right? These are just estimates, but according to SteamDB, which I normally go for like the middle-ish number, Civ 5 sold about 14.5 million copies. Civ 6 sold 17 million. And again, these are just guesstimates from SteamDB, right? But Civ 7, they guesstimate that Civ 7 has only sold 3.1 million copies. Now, that's a huge gap. And also that shows how big Civ is, right? Going from 15 to 17 million down to maybe 1 million, not including consoles and that. So for them to come out and say it sold, 1 million copies is good for most people. But for Civ, and that's why the player counts are so much lower as well, and the all-time peaks is lower.
So I think there are other things at play, which I'm not going to sit here and suggest that I'm like defending Firaxis or Sid Meier himself or Take-Two whatsoever. So I have no dog in the fight of whether or not I think Civ 7 did really do commercially well or anything. I just know that I enjoyed playing the game. But for a conversation point, games are more expensive today. And there is, for someone who browses video games storefronts often, there's like a surface level understanding you just start to acquire from being on the stores. You know which companies do sales, which companies discount their games, and which companies don't. There are some games that you think are amazing, and for whatever reason, those games go on sale or are super cheap all of the time. For example, not a strategy game, but I adore Kingdom Come Deliverance, and I adore what that studio has done. For whatever reason, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, a game that has come out within the past 2 years, is consistently half of its price, and is regularly discounted to somewhere around like 75% off or so, and that it now has finished its cycle of all of its DLCs as well. So the best possible value for that game that took them millions of dollars to make, made them grow their team by something like 10 times its original size or something ridiculous like that, is regularly discounted for that much. So that is to say, Firaxis does not discount their games that often. And when they do, the games that you see on discount are some of their oldest titles. Like the cheapest Firaxis games I see circulating on discounts are things like Sid Meier's Pirates, which, like, fantastic. But there's an appeal to purchasing a cheaper version, a cheaper copy of like Civilization 4, 5, or 6. Civ 7, I did not buy it I bought it at a discount, but it was not a discount I was necessarily even happy with. I like had to debate it with myself. My friends were like, "Please buy Civ 7, like I'll send you extra money." I'm just like, I don't buy games that's above this price. I never buy games for like more than half of its price, at least. And Civ 7's cheapest discount that I saw was like something like $44, $45. And games these days are going $70, sometimes $80. Anyways, all of that to say, I just think that the appeal of purchasing a game like Civ 7 whenever the reviews are already poor and we're already also having conversations all the time about the number of people getting into strategy games or still playing strategy games, I think Civ is just one of those names that goes outside the genre. But I don't think a bad Civ that's also taken this long to get its first major expansion like the other Civs, that has yet to go possibly down in cost as quickly as the other Civs did on sales, is appealing to the same number of people. And I think that there's that many millions of copies that represent how many people wouldn't pay that price. So that's my take on part of why Civ 7 probably still isn't doing so well on the storefronts. I don't actually think it's because the performance of the game itself, and we should be seeing that number change drastically if all it was word of mouth or gameplay, because now the big feedback update has released and has been out for a month or so now.
I want to ask you a question about this era and leader switching, Jack, in a moment. But before I do, Drexy, on the point of those figures, from Take-Two's own report, prior to Civ 7 launching, the Civilization franchise had sold 73 million copies.
Right.
And in March of this year, it had sold 76 million copies. So about 3 million extra in the year that Civ 7's been out. Civ 6 sold 1 million copies in a month. So it was it did 1 million a month, and Civ 7 has done 3 in a year. So there's clearly some issue with Civ 7 that it hasn't been picked up, irrespective of whether Take-Two or Firaxis said it was a commercial success. But success is relative. Maybe they had projections. Well, actually, it sold enough to cover its development costs or whatever. But I wanted to ask you a question. It was something which I've been thinking about when Jack said about this era switching and what I think it was Nuno was saying about casual players. Do you think, Jack, that because you're playing multiplayer and therefore perhaps your objective is to optimize in order to be competitive rather than to role play an emergent story, which is how I would play Civ? I would role play as the UK or as Portugal or as whoever that might be. Do you think that because you're playing multiplayer, the era switching is more compelling and more desirable than what it would be if you were just playing it single player and enjoying the emergent story of role playing this particular nation?
No, and I'll use this as a jumping off point in a second, and I will be brief. But to answer your exact question, I think that it was designed in mind where there is absolutely things that I would 100% agree with you are improved or affected by the multiplayer experience. For example, I don't think people, and this is my jumping off point, I'm not just trying to sell this game to you guys, but I don't think people who play Civ single player are going to like the fact that outside of the age switching, they've now changed Civ to be more arcadey. It's not just because in Civ 7, you don't actually ever switch your leader. You're only ever switching your Civ. So you only have the handful of leaders at the beginning of the game that you choose, and then those leaders never change. You're only ever changing the civilization that's tied to them. So your overarching goal can remain the same, but that means that you're going to naturally unlock civs based on the playstyle of your leader or however you're playing. Or what I like is that you'll naturally unlock civs associated with your leader or your previous civ. So, for example, briefly, I would always, when I first started playing Civ 7, I liked to play as the Mississippian Empire, which is really just Native Americans. Well, when you change to the exploration era, that naturally, it automatically gives you the ability, if you choose, to be the Hawaiian Empire. And then once you reach the modern age, the Hawaiian Empire automatically gets the opportunity to become the American, the US. So it's one of those things where, like, it kind of respects it in a roleplay sense. And to really answer your question, right, the American Empire for sure. So I think to answer your question, though, Al, the reason why I think it still matters is because the single player Civ player may not like the arcadiness. Like I was saying, it's not just the age changing. When the age changes, the resources on the map change, which is a huge difference. Your city-states reset, so all of your diplomacy and relationships with city-states that you previously would have become a suzerain of in Civ 6, they change names. They stay in the same spot, but they change names, and they change what type of city-state they are. And when the game came out, there was features about the age change, which I still despise, and I'm very glad that I'm pretty sure they've since updated. I don't think this was an option to remove the really bad parts of the age change at the beginning of the game when it first launched. Now, though, you can remove the really bad ideas they had about the age changing and benefit from the I'm a single player. I want to play as this leader with this type of gameplay, and I'll choose this civ. And then in this age, I'm kind of optimizing to choose this civ, and then in the last age, I'm kind of optimized to choose this civ. But the reason why I think it helps the roleplay is because Civ 7 has done something that the other civs have not done. They've leaned in to the history of those empires a little bit with things like celebrations, or you really feel like you're building the story of your empire with the wonders now. You really feel like you're building the story of your empire with celebrations, which are kind of a new mechanic. You feel like you're kind of building your story by the progression of the ages, where you do change your civ, because it feels like you're progressing from a Native American tribe to the Hawaiian colony, basically, and then into like the US. And with the most recent update, they've also made that even better, because now they've given leader-specific pop-ups, like a Paradox game. I played as the new leader in this new update, Alexander the Great, for the sake of catching up on the update for this episode. And Alexander the Great actually got a pop-up where previously the pop-up would be irrespective of the leader, and it would just give you a choice of objective that would reward you in the game. It was almost like a Paradox situation or anomaly. They would give you a choice, and if you fulfilled your quest, is what they called it, I think, then you actually got rewarded for it. Well, the new update has changed that screen so that it now reflects the history of your actual leader. So it was a pop-up specific to Alexander the Great, describing his traits as a leader, and then suggesting that you would choose one option because Alexander the Great was a militaristic leader who conquered a massive portion of the earth. And the other option was because Alexander the Great was an extremely, like, social leader whose troops absolutely adored him in that regard. So it was more of like a social choice with roleplay leanings, or a militaristic choice with conquering leanings. And so anyways, that's the long of it. But I did want to harp on the fact that there's other changes tied to the age progression, like the city-states changing, the resources changing, that I think does turn off a lot of players and makes it more arcadey. But it's also something that once I got used to it, I kind of liked.
Yeah, I mean, it does sound like then they've taken the criticism and the issues that the game had at launch with this era changes. Because I remember, like I said, I've not played it, but I think a lot of the arguments people were saying, like, the era changes almost felt like a hard reset. Like, you'd build up your armies and the tech, and then suddenly the era will change and it will feel like all your hard work had been reset. Has that sort of been fixed now?
Yeah, so I think just to change the tone of this episode a little bit, I'll tell a very brief story. I remember my exact first Civ 7 game, and it was a multiplayer match. I played with 2 other people, and I learned something I had forgotten from Civ 6 because we played so much of that as a group, is that if a Civ game is either new or it's being updated still in its life cycle, or maybe your friends just aren't very smart, then when you let someone else host the game, you get like the worst features chosen. So it's always like you start a Civ game, you get a few turns in, and then you're like, um, I'm sorry, why is like we're doing turns, but my buildings aren't finishing. What's going on? And then you realize that that one friend you let host that Civ game put the game speed on like the slowest possible speed, and now the game's going to take like a month to play with 6 or 7 people. Or you get onto the second turn in Civ and they forgot to turn on the turn timer, and then that one friend that always takes like 15 minutes per turn in the second or third age, you're like, what are, like, they take minutes at a time, and you're like, what are we doing? You have to have a dynamic turn timer on. So my story is, I remember my first Civ game, and this person that hosted that Civ game forgot to turn off the features that came with Civ 7 at launch about age changes regarding transitions, is how they referred to it at Firaxis. They now have an option called continuity or legacy transitions. Legacy because that was the launch version, and continuity because that's the version that makes sense and doesn't cause people to probably riot in the streets about Civ 7. But we played with the legacy version on, and let me tell you what that does so you kind of get an understanding of how bad the game must have been at launch. With the legacy setting for transitions in Civ 7, when the age changes, not only do you change your Civ, it also moves all of your, it ends any war that you have, moves all of your units back to your capital, resets your diplomacy and relationship and trade agreements with every Civ in the game. It removes your relationship and diplomacy with all the city-states, so you lose those bonuses. Then the city-states change what type of city-state they are. They become hostile to you again. You, I believe, lose out on whatever you're building at the time. So you have to choose a new building, a new tech, a new tradition. And it makes some of your buildings redundant, so you now have to destroy them and build over them. And there's several other features that make it feel like a hard reset, and it was like the dumbest thing I'd ever experienced. I was in a war, then the age changed, and then all my units got sent back to my capital, the war ended, and now I was like at a gold deficit and losing the game significantly. And I think that's the things, if I could list that, for why people hated Civ 7 at launch, I completely understand.
That sounds terrible.
Yeah, I've seen it. Oh my god!
Like I would be like, I would rage quit, and that would be it. But we are gonna move on. So we're kind of like segueing towards talking about Firaxis as a company, because there should have been 4 ages in Civ 7. Data miners found a 4th atomic age, and there's only 3 ages, isn't there? So was this game, and this is where we move into what I want to talk about, which is Firaxis in crisis, and has that brought about some of the issues with Civ 7, and has the crisis been made worse by Civ 7? So data miners found a 4th atomic age which never shipped with the game. So have they rushed it out? Civ 7 was announced, I think, at the same time as the leadership from Firaxis quit as well. So it kind of launched into this weird sort of disaster space. Take-Two have suffered losses for the last 2 fiscal years. And have they said to Firaxis, you must get Civ 7 out because we need those sales? It also released on console at the same time as PC, which I think alienate. And you've talked about it being arcadey, and a lot of the things that you've talked about said it's almost like it was built for console rather than PC, which alienates the core audience, which is the PC player. The game sounds like it was unfinished. Has that been your experience?
It's not my experience now, but I remember when Civ 7 launched and it was unfinished, right? I think the biggest, I don't know what headlines you guys remember about Civ 7. I know what I remembered from my profession. Civ 7 came out, and when the game was loading between ages, because you have to go through a loading screen to get to the next age, which is a major complaint, it's annoying. When the game would load between ages, you could hear someone in the background of the menus coughing on the recording of the game. So in the music menu background that played, you would just hear one of the audio guys coughing. And that was in the game at launch for like several weeks until they patched that out, I think. That screams unfinished to me.
It does. It does. Okay. Like, let's move on. Nuno, is Firaxis in crisis?
They are, because they haven't made XCOM 3. But they can't get out of the crisis by doing XCOM 3. Everyone knows that. So maybe they can. Actually, no. Not that I think about it. Maybe they cannot, because Star Wars is coming out with their own version of XCOM at the end of 2026. So
Zero Company.
Zero Company, yeah. I'm super excited for that game. So maybe if Firaxis doesn't want to do another XCOM, because to be honest, I have no idea why they wouldn't do that, because that sounds like a guaranteed paycheck for them, but maybe they just don't have the team anymore to work on that, or they don't have, because most of the team moved on, including it was Cliff, the head designer. He moved on he did Marvel, and then after Marvel he went on to start his own company, I think. So maybe, and the team that worked on XCOM 2 is currently working, or at least a couple of guys, they're working on Star Wars Zero Company, so we might have XCOM 3 even better with a Star Wars skin, because if you know anything about me, you know that I love Star Wars and I love XCOM, so. But I don't think they are in a crisis, not necessarily. I think that the layoffs were a shame, because, as we all know, most layoffs that happen in gaming have nothing to do with the people who are working on the ground floor, right? So they're just programmers and designers and all that. So that's a shame. A lot of talented people are sent home because of bad decisions. But I don't think that they are cooked or anything. They had a bad launch. Hopefully they'll turn things around, and from what we've been hearing from Jack, they have managed to do. And I think that the review ratings on Steam have gone up a bit. The next question would be, can they keep their player count coming back for DLCs and all that? Because I don't think that Civilization 7 is going to last 10 years like Civ 6 did. And that might be a bit of a problem. So hopefully they have something on their roadmap coming out in the next couple of years that can keep them afloat.
Midnight Suns flopped. Civ 7 underperformed.
I don't want to go on a rant, but Midnight Suns flopping is one of the world's greatest disasters since World War II.
Since World War II. So Midnight Suns flopped. Civ 7 underperformed. They suffered 2 layoffs in 2 years, one after Midnight Suns, and then after Civ 7. So the hemorrhaging staff as well. Is this, Drexy, is this a company which can survive? They released Test of Time, which I think should have been a paid DLC. I think that was in their plan. It should have been a paid DLC. They realized that the community backlash was so significant with all of the, it was mostly negative at launch, fought its way back to, I think, 47% positive, so mixed reviews. They've released Test of Time in order to try and curry favor with the community because of how badly Civ 7 performed. Can they recover?
Yeah, for sure, because this is probably the worst they've done. They've had 2 games previous that are very similar. Obviously, this is like really bad, and like you said, the Test of Time should have been a paid DLC. This time around, they've had to say, well, we've got to give the players this for free because we really messed up this time. But going back previously, I believe Civ 6 came out 2016, and that performed pretty badly at release. And it wasn't until about 2019 until it started to surpass Civ 5 in player count. I believe that you'll see the same with Civ 7, but I think it's going to take more time and more DLC probably before that pivot point happens between 6 and 7. See, I call Civ one of the few sort of unicorn PC games, right? XCOM being another one, for example, where that you have people who absolutely love the franchise. You have people that only play Civ. And I think the players will, once, if they can fix the game, these players will switch from 6 to 7 without a doubt, because they are diehard Civ players and there will always be diehard Civ players. And I mean, Firaxis has turned it around twice before. I believe they can do it again. I think it's going to be a lot longer road this time, but I believe they will turn it around again.
It sounds like they did switch from 6 to 7, and then they immediately switched back.
Yeah, because it was terrible, right? This is what happened between 5 and 6. The same thing happened. Now, it only took maybe 2 or 3 years for that to swing back. I think this time it's probably going to be closer to 4 years. But it will swing back, I believe. That's if they have they do well with the upcoming DLCs. But like I said, they've had to give this one for free this time. So I think it will probably take about 3 or 4 DLCs this time until the game's considered good by the Civ community.
So I think the interesting part about this is that Test of Time doesn't read to me at all as an expansion, but that is kind of worrying on its own, because Test of Time as an update is supposed to be their 1-year community update with all the feedback and playtesting that they've done and all of the discussions in their community Discord, everything brought back into an update, right? So they haven't added anything in Test of Time outside of maybe 2 things I can think of that are actually features that aren't basically what just should have been there when the game launched. So they're not adding anything. Like when you think of Civ expansions, you think of like in Civ 6, they fleshed out religion, which was something that people, or like faith, people wanted that in Civ 6 and they didn't have it, so they added it in a DLC later, and it's almost a requirement to enjoy the game. Gathering Storm, I think, is the one that everybody needs to have to enjoy Civ 6, and that one also added in like natural disasters. Well, they haven't added anything like that in with this Test of Time update. They've added whole new mechanics, but they're not mechanics in the idea of like natural disasters. They're things that are their direct solutions to the design problems that already existed. And so anyways, why am I saying this? Because what this tells me is not that they gave away their expansion for free. It tells me that they delayed the expansions that they would have expected in their quarterly financials for this time in their original roadmap. And whatever that expansion is either going to be bigger because it's had more development time, so they can justify possibly their most expensive Civ expansion yet, going off the goodwill of this update, or they're going to have just delayed a normal sized Civ expansion, and they're going to have already lost the community from this new update. I mean, something tells me that since they didn't announce an expansion with the community update, maybe they did that to be smart and just give the community the free update, or they don't have anything for their expansion yet, that they're that far behind on development because they spent this much time to do this update. Because come on, Firaxis already makes a game like once a decade. And so it took them this long to do an update that addressed the features that lost them millions of dollars from launch. And we're expecting them to hopefully release 1 or 2 expansions within the next year. I don't think so. They already have some DLCs, but they only add in leaders. They don't have anything that adds in new mechanics, and I don't know that we'll see that for long enough, like close enough to actually capitalize on this new goodwill.
Like I said, I believe it's going to be like at least 4 years before the game picks up when they'll have the DLC in the time. I know we didn't want to mention Paradox, right? But they have a similar thing, right? CK3 came out. It was a decent launch. It wasn't buggy, but like I heard recently, like, oh, CK3 has, like last year it was. So I was listening to a podcast and they said finally CK3 is better than 2, and that's 5 years after the release. EU5's just come out. Player counts dropped crazy. That game's going to take years until it reaches, what EU4 did. So it's not just Firaxis, right? I think it's this type of strategy game. When you make a sequel, you want to innovate, but it's almost impossible to get it right first time. That's how it seems to feel to me, right? Because if Paradox can't do it either, even though they'll probably have about 10 DLCs until their game gets good, at least Firaxis, you've got to say, they normally only release, and when I say DLCs, I mean proper expansions, right? The two previous games, they had 2 proper expansions each, plus a bunch of fluff DLC. I don't really count those. And I think they're probably going to have about 2 or 3 this time around again.
We did an episode on Paradox a couple of months ago, and I think when we looked at EU5, one of the comments on one of the Steam reviews was, "This game will be good eventually." And it's
Right.
and I thought that was just quintessential Paradox. It's almost a case of, this game, it will be good eventually. The groundwork has been laid, and it's almost like we resign ourselves to the fact that you're not going to get a great game straight away. You're going to have to wait for that to happen. But on the subject of Firaxis, I do have some concerns. So Take-Two, the parent company, I mean, they have GTA 6 coming out, don't they? But that's been delayed. Take-Two has made it's lost billions for the last 2 years, each year. Consistently, it's losing money. They bought out, is it Zynga? They bought out, and they're still recovering from having to pay that. They've lost all this money buying Zynga. They've not had the influx of money from Rockstar with GTA 6 being delayed. It's by the sounds of it, they've forced Firaxis to release Civ 7 early, which is why we haven't had the 4th age included in the game. It's been released 6 months early. And then Firaxis have, in order to kind of recover from the disaster that was the launch, they've had to release for free something which should have been a cash injection, which was the Test of Time update. And I do wonder whether Take-Two are going to be happy carrying Firaxis when we know that compared to what GTA 6 is going to do, Civ 7 is a minnow. And I appreciate 3 million copies sold, but over a year. But that's insignificant compared to what Civ 6 did. I think Civ 6 sold, 10 million. It's the most popular version of the game. Civ 5.
I think it's way more than that. Like I said, on Steam alone, I think it's about 70 million, not including consoles or Game Pass or whatever places you can buy things. So it's absolutely massive.
So if you had that in 2016, was 2016 when it came out? So 10 years ago, when you had that 10 years ago, and you've sold 17 million copies of that game, so therefore you could say that's a commercial success. To now do Civ 7 where you sell 3 million in a year, it's negative. They've come out and released this Test of Time update because they know how bad it was. The CEO said something about it was a bridge too far from the consumer's perspective, which is actually quite direct for somebody who's actually trying to sell a game, to admit that they got it so wrong. And I do wonder whether Take-Two are going to be willing to continue to bankroll Firaxis making strategy games. And I think that Nuno's never going to see XCOM 3 because I don't think that Take-Two are going to bankroll Firaxis for much longer due to the abject relative failure of Civ 7. Happy to be told I'm wrong.
But don't you think that maybe they're going to force them to release XCOM 3 then? Because they need a hit, right? No?
They don't need a hit because they've got GTA 6.
Yeah, but when's that coming out? That's like
November.
Seems to get delayed a lot. Really? Okay.
apparently so.
It hasn't been announced yet, but it's looking like September or November.
That's going to be their paycheck. If they are continuing to fund Firaxis, have they? I would question, as much as I think Nuno found an article where the CEO was interviewed and he said that it was a commercial success. I would dispute that based upon the numbers that we've seen.
100%. They still have the thing like, look, come on, we can pull these players in. It's just going to take us a bit of time, right? I mean, if Civ 7 does get fixed, quote unquote, I think you would see the numbers possibly going higher than Civ 6, right? Because, yes, okay, we're saying 3 million in the year, when I would reckon Civ 6 did about at least 20 if you include other platforms. But that's over 10 years, right?
Yeah.
So it's not like, I don't think they sold to 20 million because Civ 6 release was also bad. So I don't think they sold 20 million at release on Civ 6 either. I think they're used to this gradual sort of build up too. And if you're saying that GTA 6 is coming out this year, then, well, Take-Two's got money in the bank then. And, you know, if it was like 5 years or 3 years that GTA 6 was coming out, then I would be more worried, right? Because then the company is at risk because they've not had a hit for so long. But if it's going to be this year, then, you know, I think they will be less inclined to push Firaxis to make more money.
I hear you, but I guess the situation is if you are the parent company, Take-Two, and you've got one really well performing part of your business, say in Rockstar with Civ 6, and you've got one underperforming part of your business in Firaxis with the Civilization series and the XCOM series, you can get rid of a part of your business and focus on the profitable part. You know, I think that we have as strategy game players, we have a natural affinity with strategy games, and therefore there's maybe some emotion and some love that goes into what we think about these games. Whereas for the shareholders of Take-Two, they don't care about whether Civ is a beloved franchise. They care whether they're going to make money from it, and if they're not, then they'll ditch it because that's capitalism, baby.
I still think the two big Firaxis IPs, which is XCOM and Civ, is just so big that I can't see a company just dumping them. Whether they would want to keep supporting Civ 7 for a long time, and hopefully that will start bringing in numbers, or they will just turn around and say, look, guys, you might as well just move on to Civ 8, or obviously fit XCOM in between. But I think because those IPs are just so big in the PC gaming, I can't see, if they've made money from GTA, I think they will be able to carry Firaxis.
No, they will be able to. You're absolutely right. They will be able to. The question isn't whether it would be financially viable. The question is whether they would actually want to, I guess. So I guess we will see.
Yeah, well, this comes down to whether Firaxis can turn around Civ 7. This is what it all depends on. If they can turn it around and please the player base, then yes, they'll be fine. If they can't, you know, convince people of this ages thing and they'll keep pushing it, then no, then yes, they'll be in big trouble, I reckon. So it's down to whether they can convince the community to move to this new type of Civ game with the ages or not. And this all comes down to probably DLC coming in the future.
I don't want to make us run long or anything, but I think this is like a cute narrative that we're spinning, and I'm not trying to be belittling or anything, but there's so much more to the story. I mean, we're talking about this. I think we're just forgetting some parts. Grand Theft Auto 5 was the most profitable entertainment media product ever made by a large margin. It made more, I believe, than the largest movies ever made combined. Grand Theft Auto 5 has continued to generate billions of dollars for 2K, and it's also not just their only golden goose. I think Rockstar probably has the benefit of having that title for most profitable media product over some of their other areas of business, and so that also they have their reputation. They can release a trailer with no announcement or anything. They need no showcase, and their trailer automatically breaks records on YouTube. That's a big deal. 2K Games also has 2K Sports, which are consistently like right behind the Call of Duty titles as the best-selling titles every year. And Rockstar is not hurting for anything. They've produced a game in between Grand Theft Auto 5 and Grand Theft Auto 6 that was also one of, I think, the fastest selling game of all time in its opening weekend. It had the biggest opening weekend ever for Red Dead Redemption 2. And they also have worst performing parts of their business, I think. I don't know what the numbers were for Borderlands 4, and I have a bias, but I don't think that Gearbox has made a good game in a long time. I think that Borderlands is consistently like one of the worst games you could probably be playing, in my opinion. I've not enjoyed a Borderlands game in a long time. So there's that. There's 2K Sports doing insanely well. Borderlands 4, their most recent release last year for Gearbox, is still sitting at mixed reviews on Steam after a few updates. And when you look at their Steam releases for 2K, their most recent overwhelmingly positive reviewed game on Steam came from an indie studio. It was Risk of Rain 2. And since then, that studio has also made a profit by remastering Risk of Rain 1 and releasing that, I think, this year or late last year. So we haven't seen profits doing super well for like the Mafia series, a series that's in like the public mind for video games. All I'm saying is I think that Firaxis has the swaying power. Civ 4 was the very first video game to ever win a Grammy. It's a series that's consistently quoted as going outside the sphere of strategy games and normal video games. I think that if I was to weigh in on what we brought up before and finish it off there, I think that they are either going to be spending double time working on the DLCs for Civ 7 so that they can make 4 of them, or right now they're kind of all hands on deck pushing out an update, like another paid expansion for Civ 7, and all hands on deck for XCOM 3. I think that XCOM 3 is definitely going to be on the way. They may very well, just depending on how much freedom they have from 2K, be working on another licensed product. They might be doing a Marvel or DC game, because both of those are currently in rotation to be opening up their universes to video games again with adaptions. So I just think that Firaxis is not in the greatest spot to make their own decisions, but I think XCOM 3 is on the menu next. I think that is like both of those franchises have massive swaying power, and if they don't win people over with Civ 7, 10 years from now they'll win people over with Civ 8.
Yeah, and I've got a little bit of inside knowledge. I actually know someone who was one of the designers of GTA San Andreas, and I'm actually in GTA San Andreas, but that's a story for another time. I know what happens financially with these companies because he told me quite a lot. They delayed like the Xbox version and then the PC version that they had ready, but they delayed them to inflate the numbers in certain years and quarters. And I think this is part of business that we're not really thinking about. So not only are they going to have a big GTA, for the shareholders, they want like maybe in 2 years' time, they want to see an extra boost in Q3 or whatever. So that's when you'll see XCOM 3 come out, for example. And that's how these companies work, which we don't consider. It's not just release a game, it get really popular. No, they have to hit certain numbers in certain quarters every year. And yeah, I'll guarantee you that XCOM 3 is being worked on.
Interesting. Nuno sits up and takes notice every time you mention XCOM 3. I like that. But I think what we're going to do, gentlemen, we'll call it a day because we don't want to become a 2-hour podcast. There's already one of them out there, and you don't need another. So I just wanted to say, as always, Jack, thank you very much, and well done on defending Civ 7. You did a tremendous job in difficult circumstances.
Anybody going to buy it now?
No. No, thank you very much. It's great to have you back. I've missed you, buddy. You know, I've missed you so much. You're back to save me from these reprobates. So thank you. And Drexy, welcome to Critical Moves, man.
I bet you hate having me on now. You normally have a nice tight hour show. My first episode, you hit 2 hours, mate.
No, we're just over an hour right now, and we'll do some trimming. But no, thank you very much for giving in to my nagging to come and be part of our podcast. I knew I would win in the end. I knew I'd wear you down. So, gents, thank you. This has been the Critical Moves podcast. If you go to criticalmovespodcast.com, which is our main website, you'll find all the ways to get in touch. There's links to our Discord, to our forums, all of our social media. You'll also find on there episodes. Jack did an incredible review of Half the Machine. It's on there. I think you're covering Space Tales next, Jack. Is that right?
I am, yeah. People can look out for that.
As a follow-up from our interview that we did last week with Matt from Saigon Dragon Studios. So check it out, the website. Come and join us on the Discord. Come and tell us what you think about Firaxis. Is there hope for this legendary legacy developer, or are they screwed? Interested to hear what people's opinions are. And I guess you can tune in next week. Do us a favor, follow the show, like the episode, share it with a mate, share it with your nan, whatever, man. It's appreciated. Thanks for listening. Take it easy. Goodbye.